Okay, she's here. We have, well, what time is it? 6 more minutes. We'll see if somebody else wants to join us. If not, we'll start her up. Hi, Jeff. How are you doing? Welcome. This is Angie. I'm getting ready to read chapter 3 in about 2 minutes. Oh, Jeff, that's so sweet. I'm only like 20 something away from hitting my 4,000. So thank you for being so observant and caring. I appreciate it. Let me get a drink and I'm going to read chapter 3. Okay, so chapter 3, Hattie Durham and what was left of her cabin crew encouraged passengers to study the safety cards in their seat pockets. Many feared they would be unable to jump and slide down the chutes, especially with their carry on luggage. They were instructed to remove their shoes and to jump seat first onto the chute. Then, crew members would toss them their shoes and bags. They were advised not to wait in the terminal for their checked baggage, that they were promised would eventually be delivered to their homes. No guarantees when. Buck Williams gave Hattie his card and got her phone number, just in case I get through to your people before you do. You're with Global Weekly, she said. I had no idea. And you were going to send me to my room for tampering with the phone. She appeared to be trying to smile. Sorry, Buck said. Not funny. I'll let you go. Always a light traveler, Buck was grateful he had checked no baggage. Never did, not even on international flights. When he opened the bin to pull down his leather bag, he found the old man's hat and jacket still perched atop it. Harold's wife sat staring at Buck, her eyes full, jaw set. Ma'am, he said quietly, would you want these? The grieving woman gratefully gathered in the hat and coat and crushed them against her chest as if she would never let them go. She said something Buck couldn't hear. He asked her to repeat it. I can't jump out of an airplane, she said. Stay right here, he said. They'll send someone for you. But will I still have to jump and slide down that thing? No, ma'am. I'm sure they'll have a lift of some sort. Buck carefully laid his laptop and case in among his clothes. With his bag zipped, he hurried to the front of the line, eager to show others how easy it was. He tossed his shoes down first, watching them bounce and skitter onto the runway. Then he clutched his bag across his chest, took a quick step, and threw his feet out in the front of him. A bit enthusiastic, he landed not on his seat but on his shoulders, which threw his feet over the top of his head. He picked up speed and hit the bottom with his weight shifting forward. The buggy whipped centripetal force slammed his stockinged feet to the ground and brought his torso up and over in a somersault that barely missed planting his face on the concrete. At the last instant, last call for okay. At the last instant, still hanging onto his bag for dear life, he tucked his head under and took the abrasion on the back of his head rather than on his nose. He fought the urge to say, no problem, but he couldn't keep from rubbing the back of his head, already matted with blood. It wasn't a serious problem, only a nuisance. He quickly retrieved his shoes and began jogging toward the terminal. As much from embarrassment as need, he knew there would be no more hurrying once he hit the terminal. Rayford, Christopher, and Hattie were the last three off the 747. Before disembarking, they had made sure all able bodied people got down the chutes and that the elderly and infirm were transported by bus. The bus driver insisted that the crew ride with him and the last passengers, but Rayford refused. I can't see passing my own passengers as they walk to the terminal, he said. How would that look? Christopher said, suit yourself, Cap. You mind if I take him up on his offer? Rayford glared at him. You're serious. I don't get paid enough for this. Like this was the airline's fault. Chris, you don't mean it. The heck I don't. By the time you get up there, you'll wish you'd ridden too. I should write you up for this. Millions of people disappear into thin air, and I should worry about getting written up for riding instead of walking. Later, Steele. Rayford shook his head and turned to Hattie. Maybe I'll see you up there. If you can't get out of the terminal, don't wait for me. Are you kidding? If you're walking, I'm walking. You don't need to do that. Okay, that's Hattie talking. Are you kidding me? If you're walking, I'm walking. And he said, "You don't need to do that. After that dressing down you just gave Smith, I'm walking. He's first officer. He ought to be helping the last passenger off the ship and first to volunteer for emergency duty. Well, do me a favor and consider me part of your crew too. Just because I can't fly the thing doesn't mean I don't feel some ownership, and don't treat me like a little woman." "I would never do that. Got your stuff?" Hattie pulled her bag on wheels, and Rayford carried his pilot's bag. It was a long walk, and several times they waved off offers for rides from units speeding out to pick up non-ambulatory. Along the way, they passed other passengers from their flight. Many thanked Rayford, he wasn't sure for what, for not panicking, he guessed, but they looked as terrified and shell-shocked as he felt. They shielded their ears from flight screaming into land. Rayford tried to calculate how long it would be before this runway was shut down too. He couldn't imagine the other open strip holding many more planes either. Would some would some have to try to put down on highways or open fields? And how far away from the big cities would they have to look for open stretches of highway, unencumbered by bridges? He shuddered at the thought. All around were ambulances and other emergency vehicles trying to get to ugly wreckage scenes. Finally, in the terminal, Rayford found crowds standing in lines behind banks of phones, their cell networks apparently overloaded. Most had angry people waiting, yelling at callers who shrugged and redialed. Airport restaurants were already sold out of or low on food, and all newspapers and magazines were gone. In shops where staffers had disappeared, looters walked off with merchandise. Rayford wanted more than anything to sit and talk with someone about what to make of this. But everybody he saw, friend, acquaintance, or stranger, was busy trying to make arrangements. O'Hare was like a massive prison with resources dwindling and gridlock growing. No one slept, everyone scurried about, trying to find some link to the outside world, to contact their families, and to get out of the airport. At the flight center in the bowels of the place, Rayford found much the same thing. Hattie said she would try making her calls from the lounge and would meet him later to see if they could share a ride to the suburbs. He knew they were unlikely to find any rides going anywhere, and he didn't relish walking 20 miles. But all hotels in the area were already full. Finally, a supervisor asked for the attention of the flyers in the underground center. "We have some secure lines about 5," he said. "Whether you can get through, we don't know, but it's your best chance. They do bypass the normal trunk lines out of here, so you won't be competing with all the payphones in the terminal. Streamline your calls. Also, there are a limited number of helicopter rides available to suburban hospitals and police departments, but naturally you're secondary to medical emergencies. Get in line over here for phones and rides to the suburbs. As of right now, we have no word of the cancellation of any flights except for the remainder of the day. It's your responsibility to be back here for your next flight or to call in and find out its status." Rayford got in line, beginning to feel the tension of having flown too long and known too little. Worse was the knowledge that he had a better idea than most of what had happened. If he was right, if it were true, he would not be getting an answer when he dialed home. As he stood there, a TV monitor above him broadcast images of the chaos. From around the globe came wailing mothers, stoic families, reports of death and destruction. Dozens of stories included eyewitnesses who had seen loved ones and friends disappear before their eyes. Most shocking to Rayford was a woman in labor, about to go into the delivery room, who was suddenly barren. Doctors delivered the placenta. Her husband had caught the disappearance of the fetus on his camcorder. As he shot her great belly and sweaty face, he asked how she felt. "How do you think I feel, Earl?" "Turn that thing off." What was she hoping for? "That you'll get close enough for me to slug you. Did you realize that in a few moments they'd be parents? In about a minute you're going to be divorced." Then came the scream and the dropping of the camera, terrified voices, running nurses, and the doctor. CNN reran the footage in super slow motion, showing the woman going from very pregnant to nearly flat stomached, as if she had instantaneously delivered. Now watch with us again, the newsman intoned, and keep your eyes on the left edge of the screen where a nurse appears to be reading a printout from the fetal heart monitor. There, see? The action stopped as the pregnant woman's stomach deflated. The nurse's uniform seems to still be standing as if an invisible person is wearing it. She's gone. Half a second later, watch. The image moved ahead and stopped. The uniform, stockings, and all are in a pile atop her shoes. Local television stations from around the world reported bizarre occurrences, especially in time zones where the event had happened during the day or early evening. CNN showed via satellite the video of a groom disappearing while slipping the ring onto his bride's finger. A funeral home in Australia reported that nearly every mourner disappeared from one memorial service, including the corpse, while at another service at the same time only a few disappeared and the corpse remained. Morgues also reported corpse disappearances. At a burial, 3 of 6 pallbearers stumbled and dropped a casket when the other 3 disappeared. When they picked up the casket, it too was empty. Rayford was second in line for the phone, but what he saw next on the screen convinced him he would never see his wife again. At a Christian high school soccer game at missionary headquarters in Indonesia, most of the spectators and all but one of the players disappeared in the middle of play, leaving their shoes and uniforms on the ground. The CNN reporter announced that, in his remorse, the surviving player took his own life. But it was more than remorse, Rayford knew. Of all people, that player, a student at Christian school, would have known the truth immediately. The rapture had taken place. Jesus Christ had returned for his people, and that boy was not one of them. When Rayford said at the phone, tears streamed down his face. Someone said, "You have 4 minutes," and he knew that would be more than he needed. His answering machine at home picked up immediately, and he was pierced to hear the cheerful voice of his wife. "Your call is important to us," she said. "Please leave a message after the beep." Rayford punched a few buttons to check for messages. He ran through 3 or 4 mundane ones, then was startled to hear Chloe's voice. "Mom, Dad, are you there? Have you seen what's going on? Call me as soon as you can. I've lost at least 10 students and 2 professors, and all the married students. Kids disappeared. Is Raimi all right? Call me." Well, at least he knew Chloe was still around. All he wanted was to hold her. Rayford redialed and left a message on his own machine. "Irene? Ray? If you're there, pick up. If you get this message, I'm at O'Hare and trying to get home. It may take a while if I don't get a copter ride. I sure hope you're there." "Let's go, Cap," someone said. "Everybody's got a call to make." Rayford nodded and quickly dialed his daughter's dorm room at Stanford. He got the irritating message that his call could not be completed as dialed. Rayford gathered his belongings and checked his mail slot. Besides a pile of the usual junk, he found a padded manila envelope from his home address. Irene had taken to mailing him little surprises lately, the result of a marriage book she had been urging him to read. He slipped the envelope into his case and went looking for Hattie Durham. Finally, he had no emotional attraction whatever to Hattie just now, but he felt obligated to be sure she got home. As he stood in a crowd by the elevator, he heard the announcement that a helicopter was available for no more than 8 pilots and would make a run to Mount Prospect, Arlington Heights, and Des Plaines. Rayford hurried to the pad. "Got room for one to Mount Prospect?" "Yep." "How about another to Des Plaines?" "Maybe, if he gets here in about 2 minutes." "It's not a he, she's a flight attendant. Pilots only, sorry." "What if you have room?" "Well, maybe, but I don't see her. I'll have her page. They're not paging anyone." "Give me a second. Don't leave without me." The chopper pilot looked at his watch. 3 minutes, he said. "I'm leaving at 1." Rayford left his bag on the ground, hoping it would hold the helicopter pilot in case he was a little late. He charged up the stairs and into the corridor. Finding Hattie would be impossible. He grabbed a courtesy phone. "I'm sorry, we're unable to page anyone just now." "This is an emergency. I am a pan-continental captain." "What is it?" "Have Hattie Durham meet her party at K-17. "I'll try." "Do it." Rayford stood on tiptoe to see Hattie coming, yet still somehow she surprised him. I was fourth in line for a computer in the lounge, she said, appearing at his side. Got a better deal? Got us a helicopter ride if we hurry, he said. As they skipped down the stairs, she said, wasn't it awful about Chris? What about him? You really don't know? Rayford wanted to stop and tell her to quit making him work so hard. That frustrated him about people her age. They enjoyed a bawling conversation game. He liked to get to the point. Just tell me, he said, sounding more exasperated than he intended. As they burst through the door and onto the tarmac, the chopper blades whipped their hair and deafened them. Rayford's back had already been put on board, and only one seat remained. The pilot pointed at Hattie and shook his head. Rayford grabbed her elbow and pulled her aboard as he climbed in. Only way she's not coming is if you can't handle the weight. What do you weigh, doll? The pilot said. 115. I can handle the weight, he told Rayford. But if she's not buckled in, I'm not responsible. Let's go, Rayford shouted. He buckled himself in and Hattie sat in his lap. He wrapped his arms around her waist and clasped his wrists together. He thought how ironic it was that he had been dreaming of this for weeks, and now there was no joy, no excitement in it, nothing sensual whatsoever. He was miserable, glad to be able to help her out, but miserable. Hattie looked embarrassed and uncomfortable, and Rayford noticed she took a sheepish peek at the other 7 pilots in the copter. None seemed to return her gaze. The disaster was still too fresh, and there were too many unknowns. Rayford thought he heard or lip read one of them saying Christopher Smith, but there was no way he could hear inside the craft. He put his mouth next to Hattie's ear. Now what's about Chris? He said. She turned and spoke into his ear. They wheeled him past us while I was going into the lounge, blood all over. What happened? I don't know. But Rayford, he didn't look good. How bad? I think he was dead. I mean, they were working on him, but I'd be surprised if he made it. Rayford shook his head. What next? Did he get hit or something? Did that bus crash? Wouldn't that be ironic? I don't know, she said. The blood seemed like it was coming from his hand or his waist or both. Rayford tapped the pilot on the shoulder. Do you know anything about First Officer Christopher Smith? He's with PanCon, the pilot said. Yes. Was he the suicide? Rayford recoiled. I don't think so. Was there a suicide? Lots of them, I guess, but mostly passengers. Only crew member I heard about was a Smith from Pan, slit his wrists. Rayford quickly scanned the others in the chopper to see if he recognized anyone. He didn't. But one was nodding, saying, having overheard the pilot shouting, he leaned forward. Chris Smith, you know him? My first officer. Sorry, what did you hear? Don't know how reliable this is, but the rumor is he found out his boys had disappeared and his wife was killed in a wreck. For the first time, the enormity of the situation became personal for Rayford. He didn't know Smith well. He vaguely remembered Chris had 2 sons. It seemed they were young teenagers, very close in age. He had never met the wife, but suicide? Was that an option for Rayford? No, not with Chloe still there. But what if he had discovered that Irene and young Ray were gone and Chloe had been killed? What would he have to live for? He hadn't been living for them anyway, certainly not the last several months. He had been playing around on the edges of his mind with the girl in his lap, although he had never gone so far as touching her, even when she often touched him. Would he want to live if Hattie Durham was the only person he cared about? And why did he care about her? She was beautiful and sexy and smart, but only for her age. They had little in common. Was it only because he was convinced Irene was gone that he now longed to hold his own wife? There was no affection in his embrace of Hattie Durham just now, nor in hers. Both were scared to death, and flirting was the last thing on their minds. The irony was not lost on him. He recalled that the last thing he daydreamed about before Hattie's announcement was finally making a move on her. How could he have known she would be in his lap hours later and that he would have no more interest in her than a stranger? The first stop was the Des Plaines Police Department, where Hattie disembarked. Rayford advised her to ask for a ride home with the police if a squad car was available. Most had been pressed into service in more congested areas, so that was unlikely. I'm only about a mile from here, anyway, Hattie shouted about above the roar as Rayford helped her from the chopper. I can walk. She wrapped her arms around his neck in a fierce embrace, and he felt her quiver in fear. I hope everyone's okay at your place, she said. Call me and let me know, okay? He nodded. Okay. Okay, she insisted. Okay. As they lifted off, he watched her survey the parking lot. Spotting no squad cars, she turned and hurried off, pulling her suitcase on wheels. By the time the helicopter began to swing toward Mount Prospect, Hattie was trotting toward her condominium. Buck Williams had been the first passenger from his flight to reach the terminal at O'Hara. He found a mess. No one waiting for a hard-line computer connection would put up with his trying to jump the line, and he couldn't get his cell phone to work, so he made his way to the exclusive Con Club. It, too, was jammed, but despite a loss of personnel, including the disappearance of several employees while on the job, some resemblance of order prevailed. Even here, people waited in line for land and satellite phones and computers. But as each became available, it was understood that some might try faxing or connecting directly by modem. While Buck waited, he went to work again on his computer, reattaching the inside modem cord to the female connector. Then he called up the messages that he had quickly downloaded from Landy. The first was from Steve Plank, his executive editor, addressed to all field personnel. Stay put, do not try to come to New York, impossible here. Call when you can, check your voicemail and your email regularly, keep in touch as possible. We have enough staff to remain on schedule, and we want personal accounts on the scene stuff as much as you can transmit. Not sure of transportation and communication lines between us and our printers, nor their employee levels. If possible, we'll print on time. Just a note, begin thinking about the causes military, cosmic, scientific, spiritual. But so far, we're dealing mainly with what happened. Take care and keep in touch. The second message was also from Steve and was for Buck's eyes only. Buck, ignore General Staff memo. Go to New York as soon as you can at any expense. Take care of family matters, of course, and file any personal experiences or reflections just like everyone else. But you're going to head up this effort to get at what's behind the phenomenon. Ideas are like egos, everybody's got one. Whether we'll come to any conclusion, I don't know, but at the very least, we'll catalog the reasonable possibilities. You may wonder why we need you here to do this. I do have an ulterior motive. Sometimes I think because of the position I'm in, I'm the only one who knows these things. But three different department editors have turned in story ideas on various international groups meeting in New York this month. Political editor wants to cover a Jewish nationalist conference in Manhattan that has something to do with a New World Order government. Why they care about that, I don't know, and the political editor doesn't either. Religion editor has something in my inbox about a conference of Orthodox Jews also coming for a meeting. These are not just from Israel, but apparently all over, and they are no longer haggling over the Dead Sea Scrolls. They're still giddy over the destruction of Russia and her allies, which I know you still think was supernatural, but hey, I love you anyway. Religion editor thinks they're looking for help in rebuilding the temple. That may be no big deal or have anything to do with anything other than the religion department, but I was struck by the timing, with the other Jewish group meeting at pretty much the same time and at the same place about something entirely political. The other religious conference in town is among leaders of all the major religions, from the standard ones to the New Agers, also talking about a one world religion order. They ought to get together with the Jewish nationals, huh? Need your brain on this, don't know what to make of it, if anything. I know all anybody cares about is the disappearances, but we need to keep an eye on the rest of the world. You know, the United Nations has that international confab coming up, trying to gauge how we're all doing with the three currency thing. Personally, I like it, but I'm a little skittish about going to one currency unless it's dollars. Can you imagine trading in yen or euros here? Guess I'm still provincial. Everybody's pretty enamored with this Carpathia guy from Romania who's so impressed your friend Rosenzweig. He's got everybody in a bind in the upper house in his own country because he's been invited to speak at the UN in a couple of weeks. Nobody knows how he wrangled an invitation, but his international popularity reminds me a lot of Walesa or even Gorbachev. Remember them? Ah, hey friend, get word to me you didn't disappear. As far as I know right now, I lost a niece and two nephews, a sister-in-law I didn't like, and possibly a couple of other distant relatives. You think they'll be back? Well, save that till we get rolling on what's behind this. If I had to guess, I'm anticipating some god awful ransom demand. I mean, it's not like these people who disappeared are dead. What in the world is going to happen to the life insurance industry? I'm not ready to start believing the tabloids. You just know they're going to be saying the space aliens finally got us. Get in here, Buck. And that is the end of chapter 3. We will do chapter 4 tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And thank you all for coming. And you're free to go.